Good evening, everyone. I welcome all the participants on behalf of iHub Gujarat to the Startup Square webinar series. A little bit about this series. In order to strengthen the industry and startup connection for delivering high value inputs to the ecosystem, iHub has launched a Startup Square program to link the industrial stakeholders with the young founders. This will provide a single window interface to the student startups to interact and co create value with industries. For today's session, I would like to welcome Mr. Naveen Kumar, who is the Engineering Program Head at NATAP Accelerator. I welcome you, sir. So, before going forward with the
Thanks, Keshav.
session, I would like to give a brief introduction of Mr. Naveen. So, Mr. Naveen works as the Engineering Program Manager for leading NATAP's startup program called NATAP Accelerator. He also plays a key role in driving enhanced collaboration between startups, engineering teams, and market facing functions across NATAP India. Naveen has over 12 years of experience in venture capital, telecom, real estate, and semiconductor industries. He has been working with startups for their acceleration, fundraising, commercial engagement, and strategic investments. It is our pleasure to have you with us, sir. So, before wasting any time, I would now request Mr. Naveen to take forward today's session. Please, sir.
Thanks, Kesha, for the kind words. Just to put it across, let's say that I've been part of this startup ecosystem for the last few years, and it's always wonderful to interact with these startup founders. More than what they learn from us, it is what we also learn from them. And I have a small presentation about why corporate innovation and why it is the need of the hour. So I'll just share a bit on that. Sure. As Kesha has given an introduction about me, so I'll not go in depth into what I do at Neta. Let's just say that I'm one of those corporate folks who have been lucky enough to work with the startups. So now the question I'm going to ask all of you is, what is innovation? Is it really just improvement or something radically different? And I think you all can read from the presentation deck, right? It says a Latin verb, innovare, and which means the new. But at the core of it, right, innovation is nothing but a small addition to a product, a change in a service, or at least the production process, right? Anything that you change, make the life of a customer easy, or refine the process that how thing is moved, right? So that is at the core of it for a business. That is innovation. So innovation need not always be something that is new, that is invented in the market. It can be as simple as adding on a feature that you have built, right? So you built a SaaS product, and if you're going to add one more payment in it, right, which actually helps the customer not to go to the third-party payment, this one, right? That's an innovation. It's just that how you make their life easy from a business perspective. So then, when we talk about innovation, right, you'll all have heard the term disruptive innovation. Startups are disruptive. Now, the question that came to me is, right, is disruptive innovation more important or is it incremental innovation? And I spent quite a bit of time to understand what the disruptive innovations is all about, right? So if you look at the iTunes that came out long back, right, that was a disruptive innovation. If you just think about it as a product, it is not available in the market today. The pager, a disruptive innovation that came into the market, was clearly eaten away. So disruptive innovation on its own is not going to help you. A disruptive innovation with an incremental innovation, right, is what most companies and the most successful ones in the world have followed. Take, for example, the smartphone. It was a disruptive innovation. Earlier, we just, the only thing when we knew about feature phones, right, you make a call, you send an SMS. But a smartphone 10 years back, right, redefined innovation. You could actually carry a computer in your pocket if you look at it. The way you were able to browse internet, right? But is the smartphone today the same as the one that we had 10 years back? The one 10 years back, at least that I knew, had a VGA camera. Today, the smartphone that we carry as a 60 megapixel camera. In few cases, it's 120 megapixel. So that change is not disruptive. The one that moved from VGA to the 120 megapixel, right? That is incremental. And majority of the companies use incremental innovation to move forward. Disruptive is like happens once in a lifetime or a couple of times in a lifetime. Not every product. So when somebody tells you, right, a startup is a disruptive innovation, think through, is it really disruptive or are you going after incremental? So if you're going after incremental, feel confident enough that the solution that you're trying to build is going to work. Now coming to corporate innovation, right? The term corporate innovation can be used for both internal focused, where they help with their employees and their own business processes. I'm going to talk to you about the external focused one. Different names are given to different type of it, but on a whole, right, there are only 4 touch points that a corporate speaks to a startup. One is the innovation challenges. At its simplest best, it is nothing but a hackathon which allows the companies to find different type of solutions, right? Different methods of solutions that you can use to arrive at a to solve the problem. What it is useful is mostly for software companies to help build, identify great teams. So that is at the very core, right? Is only useful for freshers just out of college. They want to build a startup, right? And that is when you go into these hackathons. And majority of the companies, right, the companies that are into app companies or anybody with the digital product as a main, right, they will be using this as a medium of communicating with the startups. The next comes the innovation labs. When I say innovation lab, right, think about a company's product that you use as a basic to build your solution. Example is the cloud. And if you look at it, right, majority of the cloud providers, that is the big 3, talking about the Amazons of the world, the Googles of the world, and the Microsoft. They will give you cloud credits free when you join any of the accelerator programs or any of it. Have you ever wondered why? It is just that they want you to build your solutions on their cloud native. And that is the main work of an innovation lab. And it is not only limited to cloud companies. We talk about hardware devices, right? IoT companies. All of them, the businesses want to understand how many different solutions can be built by a startup from their own products. And it's really useful. N number of companies have come in and companies have also been acquired recently. Example is the ARM Innovation Lab, right? So many startups have sprung up using ARM and they've been recently acquired. The next one is the accelerators. This is the predominant space, the innovation processes. And the accelerators are the long-term players. When I say long-term, right, the hackathon was a couple of days. The innovation labs would be for case-to-case basis. But an accelerator is a group of startups bunched together, their whole technology, their business, their product, and their sales, everything is being refined in an accelerator. And majority of the corporates look into these programs to see that, what, can we work with any of these startups? Can I take this startup to my own customer? The further refinement of this accelerator process is nothing but open innovation. A very few corporates run the open innovation program because the idea is any startup can speak to them at any time. And the onus is on the startup at that in these programs, to get into the business solutions of the company. Example is you have a joint go-to-market, or you get listed in their app page. So these are the 4 major varieties of corporate programs that are presently operating. And just to give you an idea, right, how the corporate innovation program is evolving in India. The real inflection point for a corporate innovation program, if you look at from the sheet that I've shared, is right year 2016 and above. And if you just Google and see, right, what all changes that has happened in 2015, 16, 17 in startup ecosystem, right, you'll understand why every corporate wanted to come into this program. For good or bad, this is the right time for you as a startup founder to speak to businesses that run corporate accelerator programs. The last count, right, I think this is a bit dated one, talks about 60 plus accelerator programs. I'm sure that number is still high, but what I would like to convey from this slide is, right, this is the right time to talk. And next is a couple of leading accelerator programs that are there in India. Every large company, maybe an Indian MNC or the global one, has their own program. I represent the NetApp Accelerator. And similar to me, there are n number of accelerators in this page, and you should speak to any one of them that fit into your criteria, the business that you are looking into, right? If you are a B2B deep tech startups, you should be speaking to me. But if you are a B2C player, right, I may not be the right fit for you. Now, coming to, before going and giving you a depth about what is NetApp and why are we doing the accelerator, let's talk about something about unicorns and how they are evolving. All of us know we are the third largest startup ecosystem, but majority of us may or may subconsciously might not have looked into is the unicorns are morphing themselves into an ecosystem. When I say ecosystem, take the example of Flipkart. Flipkart is not just only an e-commerce portal. It's not Flipkart plus Myntra. It is Flipkart plus Myntra plus the delivery partner Ecom plus the payment channel PhonePe. If you look at it, right, there is going to be more additions. And it's not only Flipkart, the Geo of the world, the one that disrupted, the payments, the internet, mobile internet, right? Geo is no more just a telecom company. It is talking about digital. It is talking about apps. It's talking about services. And then the Tatas are also talking about building a unified app. So no more look at any startup or a corporate as a single entity. All of them are morphing into the ecosystem like the Alibabas of the world or the Tencents of the world. And Indian ecosystem is also gearing towards that. And why it is useful to you, right? If you're building a B2B businesses, doesn't matter whether the company that you're going to work with is a B2C or a B2B, right? Everyone does need B2B enterprises to work with them. A Flipkart would be working with 100 plus B2B startups. And the whole idea of sharing this theme is to understand that the scope of a B2B is larger than a B2C. B2C may look sexy, may look the larger one when you talk about unicorns, but B2B has a very huge width. Now, where do, as NetApp Accelerator, where do we play in this journey? I'm sure from iHub is helping you at the ideation stage, and they're also helping you with the product market fit. But where we come in is that in your scale-up journey, when I say scale-up journey is, right, you have a product, you have a couple of POCs, you have paid customers, then you're looking at scaling up. When I'm talking about scaling up, it's not only getting new customers, it's also scaling up your technology. And that's where NetApp as a company and the program, right, can add value to you. When we talk about maturity, right, these are either you have M&A exits or you have IPOs, or you could be a bootstrap like Zoho, which doesn't need money. Now, how do we help B2B deep tech startups? We give you grant to work with us. That's an equity-free grant. We also give you a global pool of mentors. When I say global pool, these are not only India-specific mentors based out of US, Europe. The idea is for you as a startup founder to understand what the variety of solutions, right, you can build for the global markets. We are in a phase where India is building solutions for globe, and these mentor connects really help. And select startups from the program get into POCs and go to market with NetApp. And above all else, we also connect you to investors. This is from the program perspective. We also have something specifically targeted at women in tech. The idea here is not on gender diversity, it is more to enable women-led startups. If you look at India as a startup ecosystem, right, our ratio is really skewed towards men running the businesses. Even in the startup where there are women co-founders, right, 70% the CEO role is with a male. And we want to change that stuff in a small way in the deep tech ecosystem. The program admission remains the same for all of you, but the only differentiation is, right, we encourage women founders here to apply for it. This is the second cohort that we opened up. Feel free to visit the website and then apply for it if you're a women founder. Now, just to give you a context of what NetApp Accelerator has achieved, right? We've had 42 startups graduate from the program. 9 of them had POCs with us, and 3 of them have been acquired. What it also signifies is that 70% of the startups have raised follow-on funding, and all of them are in the deep tech space. So if you are a founder, right, you might be wondering which type of areas that NetApp wants to, apply on. So these are the broad areas that we operate in: cloud, IoT, data analytics, machine learning, Kubernetes, containers. So the idea is, right, we encourage startups that work on areas that NetApp has expertise. We are specialists in cloud, storage, and in big data. We can help you there, but we can't help you if you're building a B2C solution. With that, I'm open to questions.
There's this one question, which is, what are the KPIs that you use to measure the success in a lean startup, excluding the profits?
Excluding the
Profits.
Okay. Now it's a tricky question to put it across. Okay, let's leave the term lean. Let's just look at from a startup, right? Is the product or the solution that you built is defensible against competition? Is it a value add? Right? If you build a solution or a service for any businesses, right? Does that simplify the process for the other business or for your customer? If the answer is yes, and those are the things that we look at. Say, for example, I'll give you an example. You're building something on SaaS, right? And earlier, the main differentiation when the Zohos and Freshworks were there was on price. But today is, right, what is that competition that is not only based on pricing strategy? Is it on the product feature? So these are the differentiations that we look at as a corporate program, right? The idea is that we want to work with the startup on a long term. Every corporate program, right, in India, I'm sure everyone will see the same thing. You need to have patience to work with them. More than that, what you need is a defense against your competition, saying that, hey, not on IP terms, but on solution terms, have we built a solution that can at least survive for the next 2-3 years with the changing technology? So these are the important modes that you require. Hope that answers this question.
Yes, it definitely does, sir. So we have one more question. Does accelerators also co-create for the betterment of deep tech startups? This is a question from Meenakshi Dave, and she's also explaining it a bit. Like, if a deep tech startup is building solution for increasing the efficiency of networking devices, or let's say network itself, are other accelerators having such startup willing to go with Cisco or co-create? Is there any such collaborations between accelerators as such?
See, I'll put it very simply. The moment you talk about co-creation, right, whom does the IP reside with? Now that's a question, right, for Meenakshi to answer. If you are okay to leave away your IP, I mean, every accelerator will be really happy to co-create problems. But as a startup founder, right, think about yourself. Why do you want to share something that you're building in? Yes, you can take their expertise. You can actually go to their customers. But why do you want to co-create something if it is a IP related product? If it is something that you're going to build on their IP, right? The bar will also be the question then from a corporate side is, right, why can't we build our own products? So it's not like, none of the corporates or accelerators don't want to co-create. The moment you talk about co-creation, right, there are so many other things that come in. The best way to put it across is, right, can we bundle your solution? Yes, every corporate would be happy to bundle the solutions that you built with their own product and send it to customers. Best example is, right, if you look at SAP, they list you in their portal, and similarly with AWS or say Azure, right, on their marketplaces you get listed, and it's very easy for them to co-create with you. The reason they don't do is there is this IP conflict, right? No company or no startup founder will want to take that risk. And that's my view.
Okay. I hope the answer is clear to Ms. Meenakshi.
Yeah, if she wants, we can also have a small debate on this.
Yeah.
It's up to her.
Yeah. So next up we have, if you could just share a small checklist which a startup should follow before approaching any accelerator.
See, the first thing when you talk about an accelerator, right, identify which corporate can be a customer to you, which corporate can be a competitor to you. This is the first thing that I would suggest your audience, the audience to look into it. See, for example, you're building something in retail, right? Makes sense for you to go and talk to a retail tech startup that is building, the technology might be in India, but they don't operate in India, right? There are a number of such type of accelerators. And if it is, say, you're building something for an IoT, right, somebody for semiconductor manufacturer or a designer, see the Intels, the Qualcomms of the world, right? So they will not compete with you, they can collaborate with you. So the idea is for you to identify, and if you want to talk about hybrid tech, right, hybrid clouds, and you don't want to be defined to one cloud solution provider, right, talk to NetApp. So each corporate has its own strength. So identify which accelerator. That's the first part. The second part, where are you on your journey? If you have achieved product market fit, or if you are in the process of achieving it. So then that defines the type of accelerator also, right? Programs like us, right? We want somebody who already has customers. The reason is we don't, our expertise is to help you with, refining your technology rather than helping you to build it. And there are other accelerators which give you from scratch. Example, Deshpande's, right? That's based out of government of Karnataka. So I think sure government of Gujarat also has something similar to it. So that these are the early stage accelerators that you should speak to. And then you look into any accelerator program that can add value to you. It can be either an equity free program or it can be an equity program. Majority of the corporate programs are equity free. So because your interaction at a corporate, right, in an accelerator will be for 3 to 4 months. Before you get into any program, do the groundwork, understand where they can add value to you as a startup. If they can be your customer or can they take to your customer. And the very simple thing is, right, what is the affordable loss for the business? When I say affordable loss, right, say you were not a competitor and they can take you to their customer, right? So those are the affordable loss principles. Look into it. And if they can, most of the businesses will be happy to take you to their customer, depending on the solutions that you've built in. So the first checklist is to see whether whom do you speak to. The second is what is your ask from the accelerator. Is it for tech mentorship? Is it for business mentorship? Or is it for GTM? The third is what do you do after you get out of the program? See, getting into a program is one part of the job. Next, end of the program, you will speak to a bunch of investors. Every investor will know what you're building. Now, do you want to do it? Do you don't want to do it? Just, as founders, think through before you apply to any program. So at least these will be the basic steps. The others, depending on their business, they can, prepare the checklist.
All right. I guess that sums up major points that should be considered before applying to any accelerator. So next up, we have one question from Saurabh. So he's asking, what are the key factors for getting selected at NetApp program?
Okay. So I think I didn't spend much time on NetApp program. So Saurabh, just to give you a background, right? NetApp Accelerator program is running cohort 8 applications right now. The applications are open in startup.netapp.com. The type of startups that we want to speak to are B2B deep tech. When I say B2B deep tech, think about what NetApp provides, right? NetApp is a cloud specialist. We help you in storage. So these are our primary areas. Anything to do with analytics, right? I'm talking about big data analytics and those type of areas. If you're building any solutions in that, we'd be happy to talk to you. And just to give a more a bit on about what NetApp Accelerator Program is about. It's a 6-month equity-free program. We also give a grant amount to the startup that gets successfully selected to the program. The mentor, this program is actually a global accelerator program. So the last batch that graduated, right, had around 4 startups based out of US, and 3 were from India. And for 2 startups, right, the founders were non-Indian. So it's like truly global because of the pandemic. Otherwise, it would have been, the same physical accelerator program. But due to the pandemic, we were able to experiment. What it also helped us is, right, to get a global pool of mentors, not only internal NetApp, leaders, but external leaders also. That brings a different perspective from, the regular mentors that you meet in accelerators, right? So they will talk about their journey. How did they build their startup? See, tech part, somebody can help you validate. But the experience of running a startup, right, at the early stage, when you are 5 employees, 10 employees, 15 employees, only a founder can help another founder. That is where we bring in these founders who've actually done it, built it, and sold companies. So this is a very valuable
Okay.
input for all the founders.
Yes. Thank you so much. Now we have a question from Mr. Harsh. So he going on the same lines of what NetApp does. So he's asking, what is the planned curriculum or structure of the program at NetApp Accelerator?
Okay, to put it precisely, we don't want to burden any startup founder. We will have touch points, interventions, see on a weekly basis. The idea is for you to run your business, but at the same time, try to get mentorship. So let's say the touch points will be around a couple of days in a week, where we help you refine your, technology part, wherein you speak to NetApp, engineering team, try to understand whether your solution can be used internally within NetApp, or can we take it to customers, or there is a POC angle. The other is, right, once we talk about the tech part, right, then the business one. Hey, you know what, you built a product, do you know product pricing? Have you done, the exact understood your customer market? Yes, everybody will have a slide on TG, right? But do you really know your TG? And that's something we can help you validate at the pricing point, right? The pricing point, you may be charging X amount, right? But does it really reflect, is it more than what the market is willing to pay? Or are you pricing yourself lesser than what the market is willing to pay? So these are things that has to be explored. So this will be explored over the session. And then helping the founders, see, when you're a founder, right, you're the finance guy, you're the marketing guy, you're the tech guy in your startup. So now we bring in also our digital marketing experts to help you understand which channels to use if you are going to look for new customers. Then give you connects, say you want to expand into different countries, right? Say Australia, US, right? Whom do you reach out there? Mentor pool support from there. Then we talk about something on your finance. What is debt funding? What is, equity funding? Which should you take? So when you talk about the program, right, I'm telling you the overall experiences, right? We'll help with your product, your technology part, your marketing part, finally ending with your finance part. So the whole idea is that we can add value in the startup journey when they are going through it.
All right. So that's quite a curated program that NetApp is working on. So next up, we have the question like, when is the right time for any startup to reach out to investors, to reach out to the first investors? That is a question that I guess is in every startup's mind, every founder's mind. I guess once they are with their MVP, with their MVP ready, and they are into the scale up mode.
So rather than answering straight away with a yes or a no or a timeline, right? I'll flip this question and just ask the founders, right? Think through, when do you actually need money? why? See, the question becomes, right, the type of startup that you're trying to build, right? If you're building something for consumer, right, you should talk to investors early because you need money to compete. That's very simple, right? You need money when you're going after because you need money for marketing. You need people should know, right? Because you're a B2C. But if you're a B2B, right, why do you need to speak to them before you build a product? And even investors, right, they will also need to see whether you have revenues, right? B2B is a different ballgame to B2C. So there is no single answer that fits it, but it all fits on what the founder is trying to build. You're trying to build something in, say, commerce space or in fintech space, right? And this is directly with the consumer. Yes, you should talk to them early because that's where money plays an important role. But when you're building something on technology, right, something for other businesses, right, businesses are ready to pay. Maybe not to the extent that what you have in US or the other developed market, but even in India, businesses are ready to pay. It is just build a product, have at least a prototype. Couple of customers when you go and talk to a VC, right? A VC is betting on you, and he has a shelf life for his money, right? And the moment you take money, right, it's the clock starts both for you as well as the VC because he has to show his exits to his LPs, investors. And no VC will tell you this, but for them, right, your success is paramount than you for you, right? Rather than you, right, the VC is the one who's praying for your success.
Correct.
So, there is no right and wrong time, but it is just that when you take money when you require it, and don't say that I want X amount of the money or lesser more. It depends on the stage to stage. Be open to take lesser or more depending on where you are, and that should not be the criteria when you are at the early stage. Early stage, it is more on proving what you're trying to do. Once you have done that, everybody will speak to you.
Correct. Okay. So next up we have Miss Nidhi, who's asking, how does a startup really know that whether they should opt for the incubator or an accelerator? So, like as we know, the type of program they run, it's pretty similar. So maybe that's why she's asking.
No issues. See, let's put it like this. Incubators are the early stage. They help you right from your ideation stage to till you achieve your product market fit. So they are the early stage. Say, for example, you have an idea, you don't have a co-founder. That is when you should talk to incubators where you get to prototype what you're trying to build. It can be hardware, software. End of the day, it is right. That is where the incubators come in. Accelerators, on the other hand, come in once you have a product market fit. You have a product, you have a solution or a service that you take to customers. You haven't yet, you may not have paying customers, but at least a couple of customers would have, experienced the free version of it. And that is when the accelerator come and help you refine solutions on different stages. So the earliest part, I would say that is to speak incubators. Once you have achieved, say that, hey, I've built a solution, I have few customers, but I'm not able to scale, then you start to speak to accelerators.
Okay. All right. So next up we have been in the accelerator space since years. When do you see unicorns coming out from such a huge pool, given the amount of support they are getting, the startups are getting?
See, unicorn, I would rather put it like unicorn rather than unicorn, right? When do I see another Zoho or a Freshworks coming out, right? That would be a fair question. The reason I'm telling you is, right, we assign a value to valuations, which is rightly correct metrics. A VC valuation is really good. But end of the day, right, you are from Gujarat, right? You know it, business. Dhanda paise pe chalta. If you can't earn the money, unicorn valuation doesn't help. So if you ask me, right, I would rather take any day a startup that is actually cash positive, having businesses, right? And that is what majority of the startups that come out of accelerators are doing. You may not know them because most of them end up becoming bootstrapped, or they might raise very little amount and they'll be a profitable business. Not all startups need to be $1 million business. As a founder, you should understand the most successful founders, right? Take for example Uber, right? Just look at his startups that he did, right? Before when he started it. So read through what was Travis Jam. Similarly with Jeff Bezos at Amazon, right? What did he do before it? So need not all journeys end up becoming $1 million ones. There are successful companies. The idea is, right, from an accelerator perspective, if you ask me, right, if you look at the startups that are listed on our program, right, 42 startups, I can proudly say that majority of them are surviving. Only 3 of them were acquired. Nobody has shut down. So that from an accelerator is something for us to be proud. See,
Right.
in a world where every other startup will die, right? If some startups, maybe the pool is very less, maybe once we grow up, but these 42 startups are still surviving, making some business, right? They need not always be 100 million business, but all of them are actually empowering, their employees to build solutions. So the question that I would put it, right, unicorns are like fad of 2010s. Now it is like, hey, how much revenue do you build an ecosystem? As I said, right, let's go back to the Flipkart example. Flipkart became a unicorn well before PhonePe or e-com logistics or anything came in from there, right? E-cart came in. So Flipkart plus Myntra plus e-cart plus PhonePe is it today. I'm sure it is going to be another plus in a couple of years. Geo, similarly, story. Geo was, network provider plus a digital app plus a health, and they're going into so many things, right? So the next term is, right, we should always talk about is, right, hey, who are the ecosystem players like the Tencents of the world, the Alibabas of the world? And I'm sure India, a couple of them are on the way to become those monoliths, right?
Right.
That would be a right question from an accelerator for us to look at.
Correct. All right. So talking on the same line, so what do you think are the reasons that a lot of startups get into the ecosystem and they work so hard and they reach to a level, but then there's no acceleration part that they see in the startups. So ultimately, after 4 to 5 years of doing all the hard work and everything, but after that the startup dies. So what do you think are the major reasons why it happens with most of the startups?
See, I can't generalize it. It also depends on variety of factors. One factor may be interest of the founders, the founding team, right? That plays a vital role. See, do you have the same interest you have today what you had when you joined your college? When you were 18, right? When you joined the college as a fresher, you were like new. For you, everything was new, right? Then 4 years down the line, it's like, hey, I've done everything. Now, as a founder, right, I don't want to discriminate anybody. It is just that, see, every startup has to go through an ideation stage, a phase there grow, and then there is a maturity phase. Yes, that's the laws of the nature. The Darwin's principle simply works here. There's nothing else to say that there is a right reason why they fail. There are startups that I've known personally. I thought they will succeed. Okay, really great, passionate founders, but unfortunately, the market is such that they couldn't survive. And there are founders, startups that I thought, right, hey, can they survive? But today they are like huge businesses. So there is no right or wrong answer. Nobody knows it. See, that's the beauty about entrepreneurship, right? There is nothing right or wrong. It is your passion. It is your commitment. Right timing at the right market, right? Those are, it's like very simple. It's like a cricket match. You should be ready, to play the T20 or the test match or the, one day is. At end of the day, right, you're passionate enough to play. That's all it should matter. And any business, forget about business, right? In life also, right? Only the strongest survive. So when I say strongest in business, it is not money. Please, as a founder, always remember, strongest is the will of a founder to go ahead against adversity. That is his strength. The commodity of strength is always what the founders think that, right? It's not money. Money can give you pathway for few months or few years, but it cannot be a substitute for the passion with which a founder works.
So I have two, three more questions to take up, if that is okay with you.
It's okay.
Yeah.
I'm happy to answer.
So next up we have not everybody who enters a cohort makes it. Now, can you provide us some reference with a company that did not make it to the demo day?
Rather than putting across like this, right? It wouldn't be nice on part of naming a company. What I can give you an example of my previous stint, right? I ran the contest when we called a seed contest. If you remember, I told about the 4 innovation models, right? That we took up. I ran a seed contest for a previous one of my previous employees, and there we had a finals top 5. So there was this startup that everybody, it was in transportation space. Everybody were thinking that hey, they're doing a good job, but they are going after the big giants in the space. Can they survive? They were not in the B2C space, they were in the B2B space. Okay. So that put together, right? But what happened is a couple of years down the line, the company that I worked in invested in that startup. Today, it's a successful one. They are in green. They're still surviving, taking on all the players, the Olas and Ubers of the world, and they are the largest player in the B2B. So this is on the founders' presence. They wanted to build it, they wanted to prove it. And many of time, right, the people who judge them, right, they didn't say that they will fail. It is just that the other startup was doing better than them at that given point of time. So somebody, as you rightly mentioned, right, in a cohort, say somebody doesn't want to present to an investor, need not always be because that they were not ready. The founder doesn't want to speak to investors. I've had founders, right? They say, "Hey, Navi, we don't want to speak to them." Not because that they feel that they're not investor ready. They say that, hey, let us have some. When we go and talk to an investor, right? He is expecting us to say that, hey, this is what we have done. This is where we need to scale up. We should have an hockey stick growth phase. When we talk to an investor, that's when our value comes in.
How do you see the future of Indian digital gaming platforms?
Good question. So if Geo was not there in 2016, right, I would have said, hey, you know what, it's a hard segment to be in. But Dream11 has changed the story, how they are doing it, right? And there are not only one player, they're huge. See, India is a population with demographically younger crowd. People lesser than 35 years, right? They make majority of it. What I look at is, right, AR, VR to come into this space. People who build their apps or gamings for aligned with the AR VR, right? Maybe not with the what is available today, but on a smartphone, what the Samsung are getting out, right, in the 20K and 30K range, right? So those phones surely couple of years down the line are going to come with those features. And if the gaming can go in and make that immersive experience, right? Today, what we are missing in the gaming is an immersive experience. And it's, for example, if you're a gamer, right, if you have played it on a PC, right, you will not have the same experience on your phone. If you played, those different type of immersive games on a PC, right? Today, the phone, right, is not at that. And I honestly believe that, with the AR advert, right, that might solve most of the issues. So that from that way, that's still a very green area, right? And probably that will become the fintechs of the world. What fintech was in 17 to 20, 19, right? And that will become like the hot area. Maybe not now, but once you have the ecosystem support, right? The availability of hardware, cheaper hardware, not the costlier hardware. The day the hardware becomes cheaper, right? I'm sure everybody will build some solutions on a hardcore gaming platform. I'm talking about, not the regular ones.
Right. So we have one more question from Saurabh. He's asking, what are the points that a startup should take care before going global?
See, as a startup founder, right, if you know your TG, right, that's a very clear part. Are you building it for India? Or are you building it for global? If you are a SaaS company, you should be speaking to the global audience because you clearly know that your value prop is on pricing front and you can speak to anybody in the world, right? It's just DIY. They sign in and they use your app. But if you're building something specifically for, Indian market, right, to going after tier 2, tier 3, then doesn't make sense for you to talk to US market, but it makes sense for you to talk to the Southeast Asian markets, the Indonesian market, the Philippine market, right? So those are your near customer. So it depends on the type of business that you are in. But irrespective which, except if you are a vernacular content player, right? That you can only expand if you have expertise in those areas. But if you are a regular tech company and you're looking after building solutions for first world or the developing world, right? That is the key question. If you are able to answer that, right, going global is just a matter of time. But before you go global, right, you should understand that they are very, very particular about your product and services. You only get one chance to impress the customer, irrespective whether he's a global customer or an Indian customer. A paying customer, right? So that's why have a POC, refine your product against the glitches before you go and charge somebody. I know people will say that don't give things on free, but who will help you refine? If you're building something for a business, right? The people working in the organization know what are the pain points. You cannot assume what is the pain point until unless if you have an experience working in the same domain, right? So domain expertise matters.
Right.
So very simple. If you have domain expertise plus you have built a tech that is for global, right? There's nothing that is stopping them to go global.
So as the Indian transport sector is changing, how new tech players can grab this opportunity?
See, when we talk about Indian tech, from the just a minute, let me look into this question once.
Yeah.
Transport sector, right? When you're talking about, is it people transport, or are you talking about the goods movement? If it is about goods movement, right? Say B2B, I think more than the idea is the air travel, right? That's a segment that is yet to be clearly explored. Maybe that will happen a couple of years down the line. It needs huge investments. Today, right, the surface transport has been clearly, it's a hyper competitive. Let's be very clear on that. But still the areas that are open is in using waterways, inland transport for larger goods, right? They're only traditional players. None of the startups have actually explored that. I'm not talking about global trade. I'm talking about Indian inland water transport, sending some heavy machinery, say from Gujarat to Chennai, right? That need not always be on road, right? If somebody can work out, that's still a green area, is what I feel. Very few startups are working on the waterways and in air also, right? Which type? Today, everybody is actually becoming a channel to, the regular players in the market. So it is right for disruption in the transport sector, but as I said, right, the roadways is already sorted. It is more like a niche player has to evolve there. Coming for the people transportation, I think the government, see, most of this is dependent on the government. If you look at it with an intra-city, right, there's so many regulations. So till there is change in regulations, right, a startup to survive might be difficult because we also had shuttle doing within cities. That startups, right, some for whatever reason it didn't work out because of the regulation. Because highly regulated market. This is similar to what insurance space is, right? We may think the transport is not regulated, but if you go in depth and look into it, n number of you can't just start a bus journey from point A to point B without getting license, right? So from a public transport, private transport, I think it very sorted. It's all the players are there. The market is already there.
Right. Okay, so we have one last question, and then I guess we can sum up this session. So, in your opinion, how do you think a startup with just one founder can survive for longer, or does he really require some co-founder with him?
See, this is a personal opinion. Don't
Yeah,
take
of
this
course.
as the opinion of an accelerator or this one. See, doesn't matter if you don't have a co-founder. You are passionate enough, you can do it. I have personally seen founders, single founder companies surviving, doing well. They have been part of accelerators. Couple of accelerators take them. See, the question comes in. It's only when you go for venture capital is when you may need, co-founder. That depends upon, the fund requirement. There is no hard and fast rule that you should always have a co-founder. The idea is for you to reduce the burden. See, one person cannot do everything. You have to be superhuman to look into your employees as well as customers, fundraise, as well as look into the finance, right? Somewhere down the line, you need support, right? Yes, if you have an executive team, that's you don't want to raise money, right? That's a different story. But if you're looking from a funding perspective, think about it, right? I am a VC, if I'm a VC, right? Or even an angel investor, right? Would I take a risk on a single person or a team of person? How do I spread my risk? So it's not on your ability that they question. It is just that, hey, can a single person take all this load and go on for a long time? And they're not betting on the company, they're betting on the people. A
Yes.
VC is betting on the people. That is the reason they, ask for co-founders. If it is a great team, right? If there is a laggard within one founder, the other founder can step in.